Welcome to the Meet the Parents podcast, the show where we share stories from everyday life to help with the ups and downs of parenting. We'll have honest, real conversations as together we grow everyday faith in our homes. Be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast provider, or you can watch the videos on YouTube. All shows and episode notes will be on livingrock.church/Meet the Parents.
Brilliant. And I'm Alex.
And I'm Lisa.
And we're married with 3 children, and our eldest son is 19 and our youngest is our daughter who's 15. And we know all our experiences of parenting are different. We're certainly no experts. There's no one single handbook. There's no one right way. And it's also so easy to feel alone as parents. But we want to hear from other families. And we want to hear the tried, tested things that they've done, things that they've failed at, things that they've succeeded at. And together, we want to learn how God wants us to grow our families that love Him. This place is a podcast where we can explore that wonderful variety.
Today, we're going to chat about being a first-time dad. And we've got some great guys here to help us look at that. Hello. And we're going to find out if it's anything like what we expected it to be.
So mums, don't switch off, because hopefully you can understand what's going on inside the head of a dad. Whether you're experiencing your first child, or you've already had your baby and you've had them a few months, or even if they're young, this is going to be for you. In a moment, we're going to welcome Benj and Mike, who are going to share their stories.
But first, Alex, do you remember that time when our eldest was really tiny, okay? And we had visitors coming around and we were like panicking because we had no instruction, but we just got him home from hospital and we were like, what on earth do we do? So our friends came to visit and I laid out muslin squares everywhere. Muslin squares are the answer to all prayers for every parent. If you haven't got any, get some. But we covered everything. I thought we'd covered all options, but hey, visitor came, had a glass of water. Joe, classic projectile, straight into the glass of water. They were having a cup of tea with us. I was mortified. Didn't anticipate dropping it in the glass of water.
It was good.
Well, there we are.
It was good.
And another time, got someone down their top. Mortifying. Parent fail too.
Anyway, on that note, good stories. We've got plenty of those to come.
Yeah.
On that note, though, let's welcome our guests. We've got new dads, Mike Shooter.
Hello.
And Benj Lyon.
Hello.
So Mike's an elder at our church, and Benj heads up the media team. He's also in the leadership team at our church as well. So welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Nice to have you here.
Great to have you. So we've got to hear some good stories from you guys.
Yeah.
So, but first, how long have you been married? Tell us a little bit about your families.
Should I go first?
You go
I'll
first.
go first. So, my wife and I, we've been married for 8 years now.
Oh, cool.
8 years, and our daughter is 7, nearly 8 months old. So that's
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And Mike?
And we've been married for 10 years, and our daughter was 3 months yesterday.
Oh,
so
time flies.
They're very cute babies. Very
They
cute.
are very
So,
cute babies.
It's true.
little funny story just to get us started. just warm us up a bit. What can you hit us with?
So for anybody that's watching this right now, you will be very aware that it's very hot in the UK, and it has been for a while. It started to cool down a bit now, but during the first heat wave, which was probably 6 weeks or so ago, maybe. Lauren, it was getting really warm in our bedroom. It was probably about 30 degrees. And our daughter Amelie really, really needs to have her hands covered when she sleeps. Yeah. So she wears like a little baby grow. So Lauren didn't, do the right thing, doesn't want to put her in a baby grow in that temperature, in that room. So she decides to sleep downstairs with her because it's like 25 downstairs. God. And so I'm upstairs thinking, I'll get a nice, peaceful night's sleep to myself. But middle of the night, wake up, I'm like pouring with sweat. And I'm just panicking because I just think that Amelie is buried somewhere in the covers. And so I flip up onto all fours. I'm like digging like a dog through these covers trying to find her. And then just dawned on me, there's nobody in here. So that was probably the thing that I was most embarrassed about, but also glad there was no one there.
Yeah, what a relief.
But instead, let's put it on the internet. So
let's tell the world.
Well, when I think we were about I think we were 4 days in. So our daughter was born on the 23rd of December, so it's right before Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
And because of COVID, all of our family got COVID and we couldn't see them. So we had a few days afterwards where we kind of had no plans, and Christmas had gone, and we thought, we're gonna do it. We're gonna go to a coffee shop, big trip. We're gonna take the baby.
Major thing.
And it took us about 2 hours to leave the house.
Yeah.
And we walked to the coffee shop, and we were like so proud. We were like, we're so good. We're really good parents.
All over it.
And it came to the point where I had to go and change a nappy.
Oh.
And I was like, yeah, she needs a nappy change. So in I went, baby bag on my back, the nappy bag.
You did the first one.
I did. Well, I did it in the coffee shop. The first one out, exactly.
Whoa.
So in I go.
Brave man.
Fold down the most disgusting changing table. They're all disgusting, aren't they? That's one of the things I figured
always
out.
are.
Public changing tables are the worst.
They're not great.
And it's like strap them in like they're like a patient or something. So anyway, so I put it down, strapped her in, took everything off, and she just weed. And the changing table was slowly filling up like a bathtub to the point where it started overflowing onto the floor. And I was like, what do I do? And I was like rummaging through the changing bag, like, what have I got to mop up all of
What
this
is that
wing?
absorbent?
And about 20 minutes later, Kim was like, what is he doing? And I came out and the baby was in different clothes. She was like, what's going on? And I was like, I need to go back in there. So I had to go back and grab all of the paper towels that I could to try and mop up these clothes. It was terrible.
Spectacular.
And then we went home.
Can I ask, have you been back to a coffee shop since?
Oh,
or?
yeah, we've been back.
You've
and the
got
coffee was great. But
Great. Well, I'm sure you're ready for it by then.
By the time you come in?
on the way out, I was like, I'm so sorry. And they're like, what for? He's like, you'll see.
Yeah. Can only apologise.
Nice.
Fantastic.
So obviously, we've been chatting about you're expecting your babies and stuff, but how did you prepare, practically and mentally, were you prepared for your baby to arrive? How, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe this is the same for both of us, but like, I think as a dad, I feel like preparing practically is probably the thing that you do, or you want to do.
Yeah.
So things like building furniture, putting together the pushchair or the pram for the first time,
researching the best car seat.
The
research.
Absolutely. Car seat in the car, all those sorts of things. We did a really great antenatal class, which was really helpful. Yeah. But I think mentally, for me at least, I didn't feel like I could prepare mentally. Yeah. And I had lots of people that said, oh, it's going to be like this, it's going to be like this. And the reality was it was nothing like what anybody else said. But I think until you go through it, I'm not sure how much you can really prepare for it. It's the most like life-changing thing that you're kind of unprepared for. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, very similar. Like all the same, I love researching little gadgets and things like that, and babies get all the best gadgets. But I think mentally it was exactly the same thing. I knew that I couldn't prepare. I think we'd wanted a child for quite a long time, and so lots of people say lots of really nice, comforting, try and be really helpful when that's going on, and things like, oh, but you're a parent to so many people already, and stuff like that. And I get that, and I understand the sentiment behind it. But the reality is you don't know what it's like to be a parent until you are actually a parent, especially in those practical things. And so, and lots of people as well have quite a few like doom and gloom outlooks on things, telling you this is going to be horrible and this is going to be difficult and this is going to be exactly. And so I just chose to be like, I'm just going to see how it is. We're meeting a person, not a thing, and so she's going to be totally different to other people's people. And so for me, because of that, for the first time in my life, not being a great sleeper actually paid off because I didn't find that so difficult. But then for me, like the autonomy, for example, where all of a sudden I've really got to think before I do anything. I found that much more of a challenge, and so nobody mentioned that. So I think in preparing, if you can prepare for the fact that you can't prepare.
Prepare for the unexpected.
Prepare for the unexpected and just roll with it a little bit.
Go on the adventure.
It'll be much easier for you because you won't be trying to live up to everyone else's expectations. It gives you the freedom to find different things difficult and stuff like that. So
I'll tell you one funny story.
Go for it.
Okay.
Love a funny story.
So one of the things that I was most looking forward to preparing was my hospital bag.
You had a hospital bag?
I didn't have one.
We did not
So
do that.
obviously the mum has a hospital bag. The baby has a hospital bag. And the concept of the dad's hospital bag for me was like the most exciting thing. And I was like,
who knew?
Because I was like, hospitals aren't the best places and everything's uncomfortable and nothing tastes great. So I was like, what can I bring with me to make my experience of the hospital as good as possible? So I had like freshly ground coffee to make.
Of course you did.
I had a pillow, I had sweets and
Coffee
chocolates.
machine? Little coffee gives.
No, something to make coffee with me because I love coffee.
Yeah.
And things to read and to do and all of this. And I was so excited.
Wow.
And then we turned up at the hospital, and when we arrived, the midwives were like, you might have to go home, so there's no point unpacking your car yet.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay. So we waited, and then they concluded, you probably should stay in. So I was like, great, I'll go and get the bags from the car. So off I ran, and I was come back full of bags on all of my arms and everything. Dropped them down, and literally 20 minutes later, the baby came out.
Oh.
And I had enough time to get out a flannel for Kim, Lucozade Sport for Kim, a cheese twist for Kim.
Yeah.
And that was it. And my hospital bag remained closed the entire time.
Here's the world's smallest violin playing just for you.
Fantastic.
Please give me sympathy.
Now, it was a bit longer for us. I was thinking back to buying all the kit, and we were like checking out the specs of the prams and how high tech you go with the baby
That
monitors.
was your thing, wasn't it?
I can't imagine now the decisions on, because the technology's changed a bit.
Quite a lot.
What you can do with a baby monitor now must be quite cool. But
although one piece of advice that we did get given that was really helpful was like, most of the stuff you don't need straight away anyway.
True. Yep.
And so just wait and see what you actually need. There's loads of stuff that we would have bought pre the baby, or people lent us, and then we were like, we haven't even used the one we've been lent. There's no point us getting one. Rather than just thinking you need everything. Assume
hard.
you don't need very much, especially in the first few weeks.
Sure.
As long as you got the essentials.
Amazon Prime is a great thing.
Yeah,
but also dangerous.
Really quick.
Very dangerous.
Cool.
True.
So just tell us one thing that you were so proud of. So what was like a high? What's a real proud thing about becoming a dad?
Well, for me, a proud moment was she'd been like smiling and kind of doing little laughs here and there. But then there was a moment when I did something and she laughed, and then I did it again and she laughed again, and then I did it again and she laughed again, and I was like, oh my goodness, she's laughing at me.
It's you.
And we kept going
That's
for
so
ages, and I was like, this is the best thing. I was so proud.
Wow, that's brilliant.
I think
that is a big thing.
Yeah, it is. I loved that first time making Amelie laugh. It was really special. I think for me though, one of the things that I was proud of was actually being able to be useful.
Yeah.
I think we've grown up in like the Simpsons generation, so like that was on like
Simpsons
there's a lot of kids where one of their favorite shows will be Peppa Pig, and all of that kind of stuff reinforces this idea that dads are useless, and
That's true.
A lot of stuff in society is built around the assumption that a child doesn't really need a dad, or trying to accommodate for the fact that dads will leave or not be around. And therefore, I think a lot of dads have been devalued. And so I think particularly for the first few weeks, it felt quite hard to be useful because the mum is, she's literally built to look after this child in a lot of ways. And, when we were in the antenatal class, like they were saying, just so you know, mums, you've got all these hormones in you so that you can be more awake. So don't be mad with the dad if he's more tired than you are, and all this kind of stuff. And so,
that's a really good point.
But realizing, okay, being able to take her and look after her for a couple of hours so Lauren could get a few hours sleep,
that's so good.
and realizing and having it kind of dawn on me that actually I was really important to her life. even if it doesn't always feel like that,
Yeah.
I think was a really proud moment for me to be like, okay,
Yeah.
it matters that I'm around,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, because I don't think
Yeah.
that that's necessarily a message that dads are getting.
So true.
100%.
Very true.
Just generally. So
You used to like doing the feeds because I breastfed and expressed a bit, and you loved having that time just you and the baby because
It's like a
normally
late feed, wasn't it?
you're like
It's
an
like
add-on
10 o'clock.
because mum's
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
everything, and it was
Yeah.
like the
Felt
moment where
useful.
you got to
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
have some time, and I was delighted because I got a rest.
Yeah.
Actually, it was
Yeah.
like I really needed that because I needed a lot of sleep, and you were great at stepping in at that point.
No,
It was
it
really
works,
helpful.
didn't it?
Yeah, it's teamwork.
Teamwork
Makes
makes
the
the
dream
dream work.
So what about the scariest part of it then? Because we're talking about like the ups and downs here. So, you know, obviously that's your proudest. So what's been quite challenging, more scary for you in reality?
There were two things that I can think of. Firstly, so Lauren was in hospital for 6 days before she gave birth and then had to have a C-section. I wasn't prepared for how freaked out I would be standing in the hallway, all like, you know, in all
All
my
gowned
scrubs
up,
and
yeah,
everything, gowned
yeah.
up, just waiting. Like
Yeah.
while she has her spinal in and gets
Yeah.
ready, I'm not allowed in at that point.
Yeah.
And then when the baby was delivered, there were some complications around her being delivered and meconium, and she was fine. Everything was okay. But just that, I think, again, dads are just generally are quite natural fixers. You want to fix
Yes.
things.
Yes.
And I've never felt so out of control.
Oh,
as,
that's hard.
Yeah.
and just generally in hospitals, you're not really spoken to as the dad. It's
Yeah.
everything's directed at the mum.
yeah, that's
Everything's
true.
like,
Yeah.
even when it's a joint decision,
Yeah.
a lot of focus is given to mums, and so
That's
you feel quite out of everything. You
Yeah.
feel quite unable to do anything, even making decisions a lot of the time, because
Yeah.
that's all like, mum, what do you
Yeah.
want? Mum, what do you want?
Yeah.
And a lot of that's legitimate. Some of
Yeah.
it, I think, there are two parents in the room here. But so yeah, I think for me that and then the first few nights at home, I again, you're just very aware there's nothing you can do. Like once I go to sleep, there's nothing I can do to look after her, and so
Yeah.
I had to make a decision at that moment. I remember laying in bed. And I was kind of, Lauren had fallen asleep, and I was just every couple of minutes just looking over, like, is she okay? Is she okay? Is she okay?
Yeah.
And I just made a decision at that point. I was like, God, I'm not going to freak out about this. Like,
Yeah.
you told me not to worry. That's an instruction you've given me.
Yeah,
And
very
so I'm
good.
going to pray for her that she's going to be
Yeah.
safe and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to trust you in the same way that I trusted you to get her here safely. I'm now going to trust that you are going to keep her safe.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I did that and I made that decision and I prayed, I just felt God say to me, she's not going to die in a cot. And it was just this peace like, and this understanding that actually God really is involved in all
Yeah.
of this. He's really involved in all the concerns and the challenges, and actually as we make a step towards Him, to obey Him, even in those little, you know, moments when she was first born, actually He then reached back and said,
Yeah.
"Okay, now I'm going to comfort you. I'm going to look after you. I'm going to care for you." So,
Lovely.
yeah, I think that lack
That's
of control,
yeah.
that needing to trust God in a different
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
for her life.
Yeah.
That's probably been the thing that I've had to adjust to the most.
Especially if you're somebody that naturally likes to fix things
Yeah,
or
yeah.
find
Likes
solutions.
Yeah,
order
yeah.
and
All of a
Yeah.
sudden, when you're landed in this position where there's literally nothing you can
No.
do, it's
Yeah.
quite
No,
hard,
that's it.
isn't
That
it?
is difficult.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think. So I think for me, there's probably been a few things, but I'll give you two. One was that the three of us did get COVID, including the baby, and that was the first moment where I could see her like struggling to breathe.
Yeah. That's scary.
And that was quite
That is really
scary. You know, it was quite different to if she had like a cold or something, but you know, she's like struggling to breathe a bit, and Kim and I were like, all right, what do we do now?
Yes.
You know, we phoned up 111, and well, funny story, when you phone up 111, they're like, okay, I'm going to ask you a series of questions and you
Yes.
just answer whatever.
Yeah.
So they run through their list of questions, and one of them was something like, does her chest go inwards when she's breathing?
Oh my goodness.
And I was looking at her at the time, and I was like, well, her chest is going up and down. So I said yes. And then at that moment, the guy on the phone was like, okay, I'm going to hang up the phone. I've called an ambulance. He'll be with
Oh my
you in
goodness.
20 minutes. And he hung up the phone. And then I was like, oh my word, this is really serious.
Yeah.
And then Kim Googled that question
Yeah.
and she was like, her chest isn't going in. So I had to cancel the ambulance.
Yeah.
Well done for doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was scary. And then
That's very hard.
Another thing which I've just remembered as Mike was talking was I remember somebody telling us about it's possible that when you kiss a baby on the ear, that the kissing motion has the ability to damage their eardrum.
Oh, okay.
Because of how it forms like a seal over the whole of the ear.
Wow.
And I'm a little bit paranoid about my hearing generally because it's not very good. And my brother was born deaf, although God healed him, which is amazing.
Good stuff.
But then I started going through, in my head, I was like, okay, what if she's deaf? This was before she had a hearing test as well.
Okay.
And I remember, I think my dad kissed her on the ear and she screamed. And I was like, oh no, he's done it.
Oh,
and then I was like really paranoid that her hearing had gone. And but similar thing, like on the way to her hearing test, I just had to pray. I was like, God, like, you know, even if she is deaf, I know that you've healed my brother of it, so you could do that again. But I, you know, please, I hope she's all right. And she had perfect hearing.
Yeah,
which was great.
Praise God.
You know,
Wow.
yeah, you have to trust. You have to trust
Definitely.
God. That was
Brilliant.
It's so good having him on board, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, you kind of wonder how you'd
Yeah.
be out of control without him.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
No worries.
Well, thank you so much for what you've shared so far. A little bit more to come in a few seconds. So what I wanted to say now is that parents, grandparents, we want to hear from you. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below on the screen and tell us your tips for preparing for a baby. We want to hear what you're saying as well. You know, I've learned so much from you two guys already, and we want to learn from you as well. So please communicate to us in whatever platform you're watching this. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So you've already said that, you know, you've tried to be prepared and you can't prepare for anything. And it's obviously been a significant event in your whole life so far. But how would you summarise a way that it might have changed you as a person? You know, how have you become a different person in yourself since becoming a dad? What impact?
Well, yes, it's a huge thing, isn't
Massive.
it? It's there's not many things that change your life.
No.
One of them would be having children.
Yeah.
One of them is when you give your life to God. That's a
The other
good
big
life
one.
change. But
Yeah.
it it really is a whole life change. I think one of the things for me is learning to I would say like be less selfish. I don't mean like I was a selfish person, but you can't just put yourself first
Yeah.
all the time or anymore really.
Yeah.
There's a person that depends on you and you have to put them first, and she's the priority.
Yeah.
You know, she gets to eat before I have my breakfast.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
I get up early because she's up and she needs me or she needs us. And just there's just like so many little things where I look back on before she was here. I'm like, you know, pre-baby, it would have been so simple and easy. But now it's just different, and but that's okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I spent a long time sort of mourning my pre-baby life.
Yeah.
I'm like, it
It's
was
a
so
big deal,
good
eh?
when we could just leave the house.
You just got up and walked out the door. Yeah.
But then again, you know, like we've wanted to have a baby for quite a while, and I just think like, no, we enjoyed our time before the baby. This is a new season, and we just take it for what
Embrace
it is,
it,
and
yeah.
just
Absolutely.
enjoy the good things of it, and try not to mourn those
Count the
other
costs.
things.
We had that moment as well when we had our three, and then either they're being looked after somewhere else or that's gone to stay with grandparents, and then you do just get up and leave the house and you sit in the car and you go,
Yeah, I remember
"Wasn't
that. First time we went
easy?"
away.
And you kind of feel as if you've forgotten stuff and you almost like got to go back in. But
I remember that. We went on a weekend away
Yeah.
quite a few years later. And I got out the car and I literally had a handbag and I went, oh, have I forgotten something? And I stood there and I actually did a dance on the pavement. I was like, this is so liberating.
That's good.
And we actually went for a coffee straight away because we could.
It's great. Go on, Mike. What do you?
To be honest, I don't feel like it's changed me dramatically. It's just made me really conscious that I just want to be really consistent. So
Yeah.
the person, that God wants me to be, and that, I think, we're all trying to work with the grace of God to be the
Yeah.
person that He's made us
That's
to be. We want to see those fruits of the Spirit. We
Yeah.
want to see them kind of outworked. And I think just, having kids just maybe puts more of those fruits to the test.
Yeah, yeah, that's
it's
right.
just more evident, like obvious challenges to them.
Yeah.
Whether you're going to be patient, whether you're going to be kind, whether you're going to be gentle in those situations. And so I think it's just given me a bit more of it's given me more of a consciousness that I need to deliberately do some of those things,
Yeah.
and to be consistent. It's really important to me that as Amelie grows up, that she sees the same Mike in public that she
Yes,
sees
very
in
good.
the home.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
so even though she can't notice it right now,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm being consistent in those things. So I think as Christians, for example, like Benj said, he wasn't selfish before.
Yeah.
He's just having to outwork his not being selfish in a different
Yes.
way.
Yes.
And so I think we can expect that we'll look the same in our heart and our attitudes to things. It'll just be outworked a little bit differently.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's
Plus, everything's a song now.
How you speak.
That's so
Putting
true.
on your
Yeah,
nappy.
exactly. Let's get in the car. Where are we going? I don't know, but I'm going to put your seatbelt on.
That's a bit weird because I didn't do
Yeah,
that.
you did. You did.
Did I?
Yeah, you sang about everything.
Everything.
Every dad has a little
Everything's
sing song.
Maybe I
Honestly.
did.
We've got a nappy changing song, got a
You did
bedtime
used to
song,
sing.
we've got a breakfast song,
Yeah.
we've got a bath song. Everything's a song.
It helps
I'm
to
really
make it all
good.
interesting as well,
Just
doesn't it?
parents, look,
My
the quality of what you're getting here is just awesome. You gotta sing
My
it.
songwriting abilities
Oh.
have shot through the
We
roof.
look forward to hearing the album release
Freestyle
soon.
rapping is now.
Ben's just gonna do a baby album.
Stay tuned for an album.
And do you know what? They're so forgiving, aren't they? Because even if you can't sing, they just love you anyway.
Oh, yeah.
It's true, that is
You've got a
helpful.
perfect audience.
So we're gonna
Not dissing your voice there, Benj, at all. I'm sure you're great.
dig a little deeper now. So, how has your relationship with God helped you in either while you were expecting or during those first few months? So, particularly sort of your relationship with God, your faith.
Mentioned before, we waited for a long time to have Amelie. We had to have some help from the doctors and different bits and pieces. And I think, it can be quite easy to think. I think that the baby is there to meet and satisfy your desire for a child. So especially if you've wanted a child for a long time, or even if you just wanted a child, they're not there to meet my desire to be a parent. Actually,
right.
God has entrusted them to me
Yeah.
to bring them up in the ways of the Lord,
Yeah.
and essentially they're like my wife and my child, hopefully children, will be my first disciples.
Yes. love that.
And I think that my relationship with God contextualizes why I have a child, and the reason I have a child is to bring them up in the ways of the Lord,
Yeah.
to help them to become a disciple of
Yeah.
Jesus, to
Amen.
walk with Him,
Amen.
and to pursue Him, and ultimately find out why she's alive and why God has created her and given her life. And I think for me that relationship with Jesus just helps me to understand there's a much bigger purpose to her
Yeah.
life than
Yeah.
fulfilling me as a father. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
not why she's here.
Mm-hmm.
She's here, and yes, she's shaving off rough edges, and she's helping me become a better disciple
Yeah.
of Jesus. But her purpose really matters, and it's for God's
Yes,
glory. And so I
that's
want to
right.
help her achieve all of that. So
That's so good.
That's great. I love that.
That's so good. and
Big.
Really great.
That is big.
Yeah, Benj.
Is yours like?
Well,
We're all real
I
here.
think there's definitely been moments of, I think you probably do as a parent, potentially more as a dad. I don't know, but at least for me, moments of feeling this like incredible responsibility
Yeah.
for this person.
Yes.
yeah,
And we as parents, but I'm responsible for the way that she grows up, her morals, for teaching her about Jesus and how much he loves her, and that's a big responsibility. It's a huge responsibility, and I've had moments of being like, oh gosh, do I have I got what it takes to do this? But then I'm reminded of so many verses in the Bible that tells you that you do have what you need to do
Yes,
this,
that's right.
and that you shouldn't worry about things, but
Yeah.
God has given you help in the person of the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
And,
Yeah.
you know, so
Yeah.
after a bit of reading and praying, I feel like I can do it again.
Hey, hallelujah.
And then we'll do it again tomorrow.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay. So you've obviously been through a lot since you've had your 4 or 5 months or whatever of your babies. So what would you say has been the biggest challenge to you? You know, how in your relationship with your wife or in your family, maybe even with wider family, how has it affected or been a challenge in that way? Because obviously it's not just you guys, it's a bigger a deal for everybody.
I would say the biggest challenge for me was before she came along. I think I said earlier that you have so many other parents that like to tell you this is how it's going to be.
That's true.
This is what you will feel and experience. Lots of people said to me, you know, like the moment she comes out, you'll love her and you'll feel this amazing, intense feeling for her. And also you watch movies, and obviously movies are there to make everything look great oftentimes.
Yeah.
And for me, I think probably the biggest challenge was the bond with her. It took quite a while to come. It didn't happen straight away.
Yeah.
It was probably, you know, a few months, like 3 months maybe.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking in those first few weeks, I could see that Kim did have that instant connection. Okay. I think it probably, maybe that's more of the case for the mum. You know, she's carried her for 9 months. And so for her, it was instant. And I remember sitting there watching Kim and the baby and interacting and how much Kim loved her. And I was like, I'm not sure I feel like this. And at that point I was like, oh no, I hope everything's okay.
Yeah.
And, but you know, one thing that I think is really helpful is to talk with other dads.
Yes.
Which I did. And I mentioned this to a couple of guys and they're like, oh yeah, that happened with me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
And I was like, why didn't I hear about this before?
Yeah, this is it.
Nobody said that to
And that's
me.
why we're here.
Well, because nobody comes up to you and goes, oh, when she's born, you won't really be.
Yeah.
What's the thing?
Nobody
It's
really
only
says
the people
that.
who had a great experience who really are going to share those things.
It's
And the other thing I found was like after she was born, you know, midwives come to your house to check up on the baby and check up on the mum.
Yeah.
Nobody checks up on the
It's
dad.
so
No.
true.
Nobody checks in on like how you're doing mentally or anything like that. So for a few weeks I was like, and also apparently the dad goes through just as many hormonal changes as the mum.
Okay.
That's interesting.
It's the same thing. It's the same. You both go through this thing, but it seems
Different
to be that there's a lot of aftercare for the mum, but not for the dad.
Yeah.
So also there, how were you praying? So if you were questioning, were you praying about that as well?
Yeah, I was. I think in the midst of tiredness and like this huge life change and the hormonal changes, I think naturally you just, well, at least for me, I was like thinking through all these things like, am I all right?
Yeah.
Is everything okay? Do I need to chat to somebody, you know, like in more detail about this?
Yeah.
Eventually the bond came and I think it does, at least for most people. But I was praying. I was like, God, I hope everything's okay. Like, and I started to think like, am I doing enough for the baby or for Kim? Should I be trying to like interact with her more? And I really started getting a bit like looking into myself and trying to figure it out.
Isn't it? Yeah.
But I think talking with other people was like one of the most helpful things because they were like, yeah, that happened to me.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't get it for like 6 months. I was like, oh, all right. That makes me feel much better.
Yeah.
That's good. So almost like praying and expecting to get an answer straight away, or being too introspective and trying to sort it too quick. It's, you know, it was just patience.
Yeah, it's
Trusting
patience
God
and
to
trust.
help you.
Yeah, I think in lots of things in life, you have to trust God,
Yeah.
regardless of where you're at
and
what you think's going to happen.
Yeah.
You have
That's
to
good.
trust Him.
Yeah.
So I did, of course, I trusted Him.
Yeah.
But that, for me, that was one of the hardest
Yeah.
parts of becoming a dad
Yeah.
is what I thought I should be feeling, I didn't feel,
Yeah.
and therefore I was like,
Yeah.
oh, is everything okay?
Yeah.
No, that's really
really good.
helpful.
Yeah.
So it's really important to talk. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it was again about relationships, but more with Lauren. So some people, like, we were very aware. This was one thing that people had told us, and just that we discussed was that our relationship will dramatically change.
Yeah.
Not in how we feel for each other and all those kind of things, but just in the reality of life. Like, we've been together for 10 years before we had, or like a month after Amelie arrived. We love each other's company. We love spending time together. We do lots of stuff together. We're really good at having our own hobbies as well, and doing our own things, and encouraging and making space for each other to do that.
Great.
But all of a sudden, there's this person who's really dependent on you, and particularly Lauren, like, took up all of her attention, all of her time, completely legitimately. Completely legitimately, and that changes. And I just didn't. You can't. Again, with that whole mentally preparing for stuff, you can't prepare for how that's going to feel,
Yes.
and how difficult that's going to be. And there's no animosity towards her or Amelie, but it's just the difficulty of how it feels.
Yeah.
And the challenge of that. And so, and from my perspective as well, we would both be, before Amelie came and in the future, we will both make efforts to be romantic and to make space for each other. Whereas a lot of that was just falling to me because I'm the one that's got a bit more time than she has in that, and the capacity to think about it. And so having to be quite just conscious that she can't do those things, and that's not a rejection of me. That's not a and Lauren's really good at communicating. She's incredibly emotionally mature, and she's able to, she would regularly say to me things like, I just want you to know, I know we haven't spent any time together today, for example, or whatever, but I just want you to know I still love you.
And, that's really important, isn't it?
It is. It is,
You
just
need
to
to
hear
communicate
that. And I don't really generally need words, but I think but that's just helpful to hear. It just reinforces
Affirming,
that thing again.
Can I just interrupt here? If you want to meet Kim and Lauren, you've got to watch our Meet the Mums podcast.
Yes.
So we're going to be recording that as well. So please, look out for that one as well. Sorry, just had to jump
no,
in there.
absolutely.
Shameless
Plug the next episode. And so, we just have to adapt in that situation. So, for example, our one night in where I wasn't working or we didn't have something on or whatever, Amelie just screamed the entire time. Bless her. And she needed that attention. And so the next time we were like, okay, where doesn't she scream? In the car. So put her in the car.
So
and date night became go through the drive-through, get a McFlurry, sit in the car. And chat, or put her in the pram and take her for a walk, and those things all of a sudden become like a little bit of a lifeline to
Yes.
Because the reality is that the best thing for Amelie's future is to have parents that love each other, that have a really solid relationship, and so invest in your relationship so that it can take those strains when they come and things like that. If you're expecting a child or you're wanting a child, make sure that you're really confident that your relationship is strong so that it can, and just try and communicate the best you can during those things, and just be creative, with what time you can have together, and really prioritize it.
I think that's it.
Sorry,
go for it.
I was going to say one thing that we found helpful, or I think we found helpful. I think it's helpful. Well, two things. Our daughter's now in a bit more of a sleeping routine. So, but pretty much by 7:00 she's asleep, and she's down for the night, which is great. But whichever one of us puts her to bed, the other one will go downstairs, tidy the lounge away, tidy up the kitchen, kind of like reset it so that by the time the other one comes down, it feels like it's our space again, not just the baby's space. That's been quite helpful.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, kind of along a similar line to what Mike has been saying, but I've learned to make sure I try and reassure Kim a lot that she's doing a great job.
Really good.
That
That's
she's
so
a good mum.
Yeah.
And because I'm sure that she's probably all of the time questioning, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Am I good enough, etc. And of course she is. But I think she needs telling that quite a lot.
That's so true.
Not that she's insecure, but
no, but I think all mums need that.
Yeah. So
just
and even like if I come home from work, I just try and say to like, I really appreciate that you've put a load of washing in, because I'm aware that when you're at home with the baby the whole day, it can be quite hard to get stuff done.
Absolutely.
And you probably feel like you're achieving nothing. So just reassurance for your partner that they're doing a good job, that you appreciate what they're doing as well as being a mum.
Very good.
I think it's been really helpful.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And for mums to affirm the dads as well. Just to say, we acknowledge the bit that you're trying, you can't do everything, but we see you there and you're doing that extra bit to help us.
To come home from work and to be emotionally available for your wife and your daughter or your son, to be there, to be awake. I know that she's tired as well, but to be available like that can be quite draining. I found
coming home from work is quite a challenge. That moment, isn't it?
Try and squeeze it all in that short window before they get to bed.
And we had a situation recently where for like a couple of weeks, I would get home from work, and that's when Amelie would just have like a really difficult period. So I haven't seen her all day, and then when I do see her, she's just screaming.
You get the taste of her.
In reality, And then Lauren's just telling me these dreamy things she's done all day, and that communication, I think, is just as difficult it is to make space for it. Talking about it and just being honest with, me having to have the conversation with Lauren, like, you are working at home. You are looking after this child, but you have the ability to spread your work over a much greater period of time. So it doesn't have to always be, and it will be at times, and because everyone has bad days. Right. Whether you're at work or looking after a baby in that way, doing work or unpaid work, paid or unpaid. But whereas my work is like, I have to be doing stuff in this space of time, and that's quite intense and focused, and it's not that I get like loads of breaks necessarily, depending on the day, and so it's just having to adapt to like, I've come home from work and now I have got the opportunity to take the baby and you have a break, but also I need a break, and just trying to talk about those things and being willing to say stuff that at first maybe someone reacts to and goes, I don't like the fact that you said that, but just being trying not to get annoyed at how one person's feeling, because it will be different, because you're living two very, very different experiences. If one of you's working and one of you's at home with the child, and you've got very different challenges. You'll be finding all the sleeplessness or the intensity of everything going on will be affecting each person differently. And so
communication.
Communication all the way.
Communication.
And lots of grace. Lots of grace for everyone.
And you saying about the 7 o'clock reset, and I think this was something we'll cover in a future podcast as well, is that we're sort of at the other end where we've got older teenage children where you don't get that space.
Get time.
We remember that 7 o'clock space when the kids are all asleep. Or
we long for 7. Those days.
And, but just how we organise stuff to make sure we do get time together now, because they're still around and
they want to hang out in the evenings.
Which is good, and you still need your space. So that's something we'll explore in another podcast.
The reality is life just has challenges.
And you have to ride each season, don't you?
Exactly, they're all different. And for us, not having a baby and going through that process was much harder than all the things that come now with having one. So it's just different challenges for different seasons, and just learning to navigate them.
So we're going to try and bring things to a little bit of a close. Now there's 3 things that you guys are going to help us with. We were going to 3 key points that our families can take away from this podcast. You had about 6 or 7 or 8 between you,
but we boiled it down.
But you overlapped in certain ways as well. So what 3 things then would you say would be takeaways from this podcast?
You want to start, and then I'll do.
Sure. Alex has helpfully written them down.
What did you say?
So I suppose one thing that I feel passionate about, which hopefully is helpful, is to understand that if you don't feel that bond straight away with the child, like it's okay, like it will come. Just trust that really God's got it, and just enjoy the season as it is. Just embrace it, and trust that it will come along.
Definitely. For me, I think. It's that as a dad, you are valuable and important, and the scripture is full of the importance of fathers. And so even if you can't do as much as you would like to do, even if some of that is limited, even if, because that will go through stages as your child gets older, you are really, really critical to that child's
That's
life.
right.
And you're really critical to your
Vital.
wife's life.
Yes.
Supporting her
So
and
true.
caring for her and looking after her. And so even when it doesn't feel like it, you are really, really valuable as a dad.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And finally, it's that God's given you everything you need
Yeah.
to do the job well.
Yeah.
He's in you. If you're giving your life to Him, He's in you. And you can do it. Basically,
You can do
Yeah,
it.
definitely.
Yeah. God is with you. You can do all things.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for joining us
No
today.
problem.
It's been really, really great
It's
to
been
have
fun.
you. I've learned so much about you guys. There's more to unpack, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Get some time with them if you know them. But it's been really great. Thank you so much. We'd love you to like and share the videos with people you know who might find this really helpful,
please do.
particularly new parents or those who are expecting, or grandparents if you've got children who are due to have a baby soon. I'm sure these top tips will be really helpful. So do go ahead and share that widely. We'd love to hear your questions. You can go to livingrock.church/meet the parents if you want to submit a question for us to look at, or you want to share your stories or your top tips. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much. See you soon.